Where's the numbers? All right. How's it going, my Comic Chat Army? We're here with Jason Douglas, the creator of Parallel. How you doing, Jason?
I'm doing well. Thank you very much for having me on. It is a distinct pleasure, sir.
Well, thank you. So tell us about Parallel.
Parallel is my one-shot graphic novel through SourcePoint Press. First comic I've ever written. First comic I've definitely ever published. It's a pretty dark sci-fi tale about alternate realities, but it's really wrapped thematically in something I think a lot of people can relate to. Parallel is a story of Landon, who kind of wakes up in his late 20s and realizes that thing that a lot of us do, whether we realize it later in life or earlier in life, where your dreams, you've let a lot of the dreams that you had, that you held on to in your late teens, your early 20s, and you've kind of let them slide away. That idea of waking up and realizing that time has passed and you haven't accomplished the things that you always thought you had time to accomplish, right?
Right.
And Landon kind of is in this thing that a lot of us are, where there's kind of a depression that comes with that, a stagnation in life, where you made these decisions where you thought you had all the time in the world to become the author you wanted to become, the musician, the actor, whatever your, in his case, music. And he did that thing that so much of us do at a certain age, where we make a decision to pay the next bill, or to get in a relationship because it's easier rather than harder, or just to pay the rent the next day, or kind of the comfort of knowing that you've got a tomorrow instead of taking that big risk on a dream. And suddenly 5 years have gone by, 10 years have gone by, or like, in my case, where I always had this dream to write comics, and 20 years go by, and time isn't slowing down, time isn't stopping, and you haven't done it, and maybe you don't get a second chance, right? And how it's that existential crisis. Right now, the pop culture term of it is called the quarter life crisis, right? And that's what Landon's having. Now, where it gets really dark and the sci-fi twist is, in his case, he starts seeing visions and hearing voices, and there's this other version of him that's kind of reaching out from a parallel version that he made different choices and he followed those dreams. And this alternate version of him is offering him a chance that a lot of us don't get, that you can actually have this life. Where it gets dark and where it gets a little bit heavy is, what's the price? Mm-hmm. Because what this other Landon is offering our character comes with a price, and it might not be in Landon's best self-interest mentally and even physically to get this kind of second chance that so many of us desire. But it's really a story about that, and about that existential crisis that so many of us go through, and the life choices that we make, and the cost of a second chance, whether we have a chance at it or deserve a chance at it. And I think also it's kind of it's really a mental health story, right? Because I don't care. You want to talk about realism? I don't care who you are. If you start hearing voices and seeing visions, and as tempting and seductive as the message might be, and you'll see this throughout most of the book, like Landon goes back and forth. Like, is he losing it, right? Or is it really happening? Because everybody else in his life is in the here and now, and his wife and his doctor and his psychologist are all saying, like, you're going nuts. And he's like, yeah, I know. And then the next minute, it's very, very real what's happening to him. You kind of go back and forth. There's a lot of that ambiguity, a lot of chance for the audience to kind of make up their mind exactly what's happening. So I kind of like it for that aspect as well.
Right. I like it because it stands out from the typical superhero books that we're getting overwhelmed with nowadays.
Yeah.
So tell us how you got into SourcePoint Press.
So it's an interesting story. It's a fun story, and a lucky story on my part. I think I mentioned that this is the first comic that I've written. I've published a couple plays before this, but like, this is the first comic script, and that was always the dream. And I wrote the first half of Parallel, like, kind of in a vacuum, right? There wasn't a plan. There wasn't an artist attached. There certainly wasn't a publisher or anything I was looking at. That was the furthest thing from my mind. I had to take that first step, right? because
Right.
nothing had existed like this in my life before, and yet it was something I always really wanted. And so I wrote that first 32 pages of it just to see if I could, because I knew I had to, and studied the form, and tried to create this thing that didn't exist before. But once I got to that halfway point, I started thinking a little bit larger, like, okay, well, what happens next? And I'll be honest with you, it was daunting, and it was a little off-putting, because I started to look online, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
how do you get a script in somebody else's hands? And there's two major camps, right? You've got your 100% self-publishing route, right? Which is
Right.
you get the funding through Kickstarter or something like that, or you literally have to look at what are the requirements from company A, B, C, D, of varying sizes, of varying genres, of varying levels in the industry, and what do they require or even accept for submissions. And honestly, there's not a lot of companies out there that want to see your script, right?
Mm-hmm.
That have open submissions. And if they do, most of them want your art, right? Not a lot of
Right.
wiggle room for a writer out there.
So did you
And
write it and draw it, or
so
just?
no, Adam Ferris is my artist. So I wrote it, and I had the roughest of sketches for certain panel layouts and stuff like that. But no, you don't want to see my drawings. That was like for the feedback that I've gotten on the book, and everybody loves the story and everybody loves the art, and I can really tell you that there would be a lot less positive feedback if any of my art was in that book. But I didn't let the idea that it didn't seem like it was going to happen just by poking around online get me
Right.
down. And I went to do you remember the days where we had comic conventions like
Yeah.
several months ago before all this stuff happened in the world? I went to Motor City Comic Con a couple of years ago, and I took a folder with the script in it, and a pitch, and character bios, and a cover letter. Literally, I took it from my day job as a teacher. I took like the file folder, the manila envelope with like
Mm-hmm.
color paper clips, like as old school as you get. And I walked into the convention. I walked up to the biggest, brightest, most attractive booth that I knew was a publisher, and it happened to be Source Point Press. And I walked up to the first dude who caught my eye, who just happened to be Travis McIntyre, the president, co-founder, and editor-in-chief, mostly because he had this fantastic orange, massive, crazy beard that you couldn't look away from. And I walked up to him, and I was just like, there's Travis with this luxuriant orange beard. You can't turn away from him. And I walk up to him, and I literally hand him like the folder, and he kind of looked at me sideways, and it's like this thing I'll never forget, because he's like, are you pitching me a comic? What do you think this is, 1971? Like, where is the email? Like, where is the electronic version of this? And I'm like, this is what I got for you. And he kind of looked at it, and he's like, I kind of like the cut of your jib, and I'm gonna take this home, and I'm gonna read it tonight, and come back and see me at the con tomorrow. And I came back on Saturday, and he was ready to sign me up and sign Parallel up. And he's who found the artist, right? I signed my contract, and they got me the artist, and they got me Bob Sally as the editor, and Justin Birch as the letterer later on down the line. And then Casey Pierce, the great Casey Pierce from Source Point, wrote my foreword. And it's like, I stumbled into what I consider like literally the best independent comics family going today. And, I might say, independent comics company, which is true too, but it's so tight knit, and everybody is so supportive of everybody. It is like this amazing family that does great work. I mean, I'm going to give them this shout out. So like during quarantine, when everybody's locked down, and your favorite local comic brick and mortar shop is kind of like closed doors and not able to sell comics, and maybe struggling, Source Point, even at their size, I mean, they are not a corporate giant like DC or Marvel, right?
Right.
There's not this corporate infrastructure of 80 years behind them. They are as big as they are in the small press world. It's still a tiny company. And even while they're fighting for their own survival during this, they're running their retailer relief program. And like every time you order a comic online, like you go and get Parallel from SourcePoint, SourcePointPress.com, and at checkout, like you can enter the name of your local brick and mortar store, and they were giving financial relief to all the brick and mortar stores that you ordered, that you said as you ordered books through them. I mean, it's like this amazing tight knit family, and I'm really, really lucky that I get to call myself a part of it now.
That's awesome that they're doing that. I hear a lot of different publishers doing that for comic book stores.
Yeah.
It's so great that everybody's coming together like that.
Yeah, I mean, it truly is a community, right? And it's this
Right.
thing that we love. And if it's something that you love, you've got to support it. You know, you've got to support it in any way you can. And they found kind of like this loophole, like you couldn't go to the store for 2 months. So how do we support these things that are not only part of our livelihood, but these things that we love too, and we're all in it together, like you said.
Right. You said you're working on a second script. Can you tell us a little bit about it?
Yeah, I mean, it's a bit of a left turn from parallel. It's not quite as dark, but it is just as close to my heart. It is set in 1946. It's a post-war story. It's got some superpowers in it, but it is very much dedicated and loosely based on my late grandmother and the women of World War II that when the men came home did not have any jobs anymore. And we've got the story of like this young girl who kind of steps into that hostile workforce, but has a couple of special abilities that she got through some pretty nasty trauma a few years before. And it kind of is also dedicated to a lot of the young ladies who have come through my classroom in the last 20 years, who even in the 21st century still have to struggle with a lot of limitations and biases that you would think after a couple centuries of struggle wouldn't necessarily be there, but still are for them. And it's actually really, the other thing that I'm really excited about this book is I did a lot of research for it. There's a lot of real life facts and locations in it. So it takes place in this factory in this small town in Plymouth that was, through records, I did some research, found out my great grandfather actually worked in World War II that made, check this out, they made Marsden mats. They were this company that used to make wires, and it got transferred down the road at the car manufacturing plants. They turned it into B-17s. And in this factory, they made these Marsden mats. These are these long metal punctuated mats that they used to make the temporary runways in Europe and the Pacific during World War II. So you could have your planes and your bombers take off from anywhere. Mm-hmm. And this factory, which is like right down the road from where I grew up, and my great grandfather apparently worked in, is a real place. And I got to get in there, literally, check this out, the week before they tore it down, to take a tour and get video footage and pictures and stuff of the original machinery and the brickwork. And a lot of the story and the struggles actually take place in that factory.
Oh, wow. That's so cool.
Yeah.
As a teacher, does your students know about your comic book, or do you kind of keep it separate?
So, I mean, I kind of I use Jason Douglas is just the slightest of pen names, right? And mm-hmm. That's what I use on all of my writing, not because not because I'm ashamed of it on any level, certainly not. I want people to go out and buy the book and enjoy it and communicate with me on Instagram and on social media and stuff, but you kind of want to keep that stuff separate. Mm-hmm. And Parallel itself it's a pretty dark book with a lot of adult themes and a lot of pretty harsh language in it and stuff like that. So yeah, I kind of keep those two parts of my life separate, just to because they don't necessarily mix all that well, and I don't know how well a school district would really even look on that. So yeah,
right. So the book is out now. They can get it at SourcePoint.
Yeah, absolutely. So I mean, things got derailed a little bit, right? Because I was in previews in February, and then when Diamond shut down, so there's a bunch of comic shops that will be getting it, getting their couple of copies, or if people ordered it back in February, they'll get them as soon as Diamond opens back up. But basically, yeah, you can get it today. You can head over to sourcepointpress.com and pick up your copy, and they'll ship it to you right now. And there's also, and this is coming from being a huge fan of comics myself for a long, long time, I think one of the most amazing things that happened in this process is there's been 3 variants made of my comic, which just completely blows my mind, 2 of which have sold out already. And there's one with a few issues left available. There's a 100 print Garner variant, Sanctum Sanctorum Comics and Oddities print run, and you can go over to their website. There's actually a direct link in my bio on Instagram. So if you go and check me out at J Douglas Writes on Instagram, there's a direct link in my bio, and that variant's almost gone. 2 variants that were done for this company, for this 300 copies of 200 from artist Esteban, who does a lot of variant covers for Source Point. Those sold out, and then 100 of the foil virgin variants. Those sold out. Those are like it's like gotten really wild. Like
Wow.
you go and it's like on eBay and spot. It's like blowing up in price. And like as a kid who grew up, collecting comics myself, to see that and like an aftermarket value of things I've made has just completely blown my mind. But yeah, you can head over to Source Point and get a copy of the book. That great cover by Adam Ferris. You can head over to Sanctum and get a copy of the variant. And I've got links in my bio to both of those places if you want to come and see me on Instagram.
Yeah, I'll put all the links down in the description for people.
Cool.
All right, well, that's it for now. Do you have any shout outs or anything you want to tell the people?
Honestly, I just really, really want to get that message out there that if you love comics, right? If you're watching this or you're reading your books and you really love comics as much as I think a lot of us do, it's part of our job, I think, as consumers of the product to support stuff that you love, right? And whether that be walking into your local shop when you can, or ordering through them online, or supporting a company like Source Point Press by ordering through them, or giving them a shout out, or reposting something. Like, I think it's our job to do it. And I'm not talking about that necessarily just as me as like a creator and indie comics, but because as a fan, like, on the other side of this, I have realized all the blood, sweat, and tears and the time that goes into this, right? As a fan, I took a lot of the time and the effort for granted, being the reader and the collector for a lot of years. And now seeing how much time and effort and love that goes into this, I really, really, really want to reiterate, like go out and support your small press, go out and support your local comic shop and your local artists, and give them any support that you can. They're providing that entertainment for us, and we deserve to support them.
All right. Well, thank you so much.
Oh, it's my pleasure. Thank you so much.